Hello, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic. Today I'm going to have a look at a viewer requested puzzle, which is a Daily Telegraph moderate rated Killer Sudoku. So we're going to go right back to the beginning and talk about some of the very basic principles that you need to know in terms of solving Killer Sudoku. But first of all, I thought I'd just quickly show you the solution from today's Times Concise crosswords. This is just a quick crossword. Set by none other than John Grimshaw every day, who some of you may know is undoubtedly one of the cleverest people you could ever wish to meet. And the reason I thought I'd show you this is that in every concise crossword published by the Times, there is what's called a Nina. So John puts these into the grid, and sometimes they're little messages, like, you know, if you might find in some of them, if you read across the unchecked letters in certain rows and columns, they spell things. But it's worth just pausing the video here and having a look at this grid and see if you can see what he's done here, because I think it's very original and very, very clever. I'll tell you what it is now. If you view some of these black squares here as actual letters, like you can see this set of black squares looks like an H, as does this one. So now let's read down the grid, and you can see you can now read boarding house if you view this these black cells as an H. Similarly down here, Irish Republic, and I thought that was lovely. So I just wanted to share that with you before we move on to the main event. So here's the puzzle. Now, there are two or three things to know about Killer Sudoku. Obviously, normal Sudoku rules can be useful, but at the start we need to be looking for two things. Firstly, restricted cages. Now, what do I mean by a restricted cage? Well, I mean a cage that can only be a limited number of possibilities. And if we stare at this grid, there are, I think, two obvious points where you might want to make some notation. So if we have a look at this 29 cage here, 29 in 4 cells can only be done in one way, and that's the numbers 5, 7, 8 and 9. So I would really recommend, if you find cages like this, do enter some notation to remind you. Now, the other cage here that I think is perhaps relevant, this one, the 11 cage in 4 cells, again, that can only be made with one set of digits, 1, 2, 3 and 5. And for good order, actually there's another 11 cage here, let's do that one too. And finally this 23 cage, 23 in 3 cells, so that's 6, 8 and 9 always. So put these in. What now? Well, the most usual place to start with the Killer Sudoku is to look at the geometry of the cages. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we need to use the number 45. Why do I say that? Well, if you add up the numbers from 1 to 9, you will get the number 45. Now, Sudoku has the property that we know that every row, every column, and every 3 by 3 box will contain the numbers from 1 to 9, exactly once each, so we know that all of those things add to 45. Now, we can use that, therefore, to immediately write in the value of cells like this one, because I know this block adds to 45, but already contains within it a 21 cage and a 14 cage. Well, if I add 21 to 14, I get 35. So I know these 3 cells have to add to 10. Therefore, this cell can only be a 1, because we know the total of the whole cage is 11. So that resolves this little part of the grid. And we can do the same thing up in the top right here. So here we've got 23 plus 8 is 31. These 3 cells, therefore, have to add up to 14. This cell here must be a 6. Let's eliminate the 6 from this cell. And there are a variety of ways to make progress from here, but let me show you one of the nice ways, one of the elegant ways. Let's have a look at this 3 by 3 block. Now, we already have a 1 here, and we have a 7 cage and an 8 cage. So this 7 cage, let's think about how we can make the number 7 using only 2 digits without using a 1. Well, there are 2 ways. One of them is a 2-5, and one of them is a 3-4. But 2-5 is a massive problem here. Why do I say that? Well, let's think about it. If I put the 2 and the 5 in, how do we now fill this 8 cage? This 8 cage can either be 1, 7, well, it can't be now because we've got a 1 here, 2, 6, well, it can't be, we've got a 2 here, or 3, 5, can't be because we have a 5 here. So in fact, this 7 cage has to be 3 and 4. And this is one of these little tricks that you'll get better at the more of these you do. Now once we have a 3 and a 1 in this 3 by 3 block, this 8 cage is forced now to be 2 and 6. Again, this is very important. This 14 cage now can't contain a 6, so it can't be 6 and 8. So it must be 5 and 9, which leaves these two squares here, as they can only be 7 and 8, but look, this is part of a 14 cage, so it can't be 7. If it was 7, there would be another 7 here, and we'd have a repeated 7 in the row. So that's going to have to be an 8, that's going to have to be the 7. I'm not going to do the whole puzzle, but I'm going to just give you a flavour as to how one can go about solving these puzzles. They can seem completely intractable when you first look at them, but once you know some of the principles involved, you know, they can become a very doable. Let's put it like that. Now because we've resolved this 7 here, we now know that the remaining cells in this 29 cage must add to 22. 22 plus 6 is 28, plus 16 is 44. So this number, using our 45 rule, has got to be a 1. And look at that, that 1 is part of an 18 cage. So we need these two cells to add up to 17. Well, there's only one way of doing that, and that's with an 8 and a 9. Another little trick you can do here, if we look along row 6, you can see we have two 10 cages we need to fill, and we've already used the numbers 8 and 9. Well, there are only 4 ways of making 10 in 2 cells. 1, 9, 2, 8, 3, 7, and 4, 6. So I know that 3 and 4 are going to appear here, so I can eliminate the 3's and add a 1, 2, 5 there. Not immediately useful, but might be useful later. And don't forget when you're solving Killer Sudoku that it's an ordinary Sudoku, so we can always use ordinary Sudoku rules to make progress too. We have a 6 here. That means this is a 6 and this is a 2. This cell here therefore must be a 2. Simple Sudoku rules. We have a 2 here, a 2 here. There has to be a 2 in one of these 3 cells. Well, it can only be here now because this cell isn't a 2. That means this cell here is a 1 or a 5. Now think about this 6 cage. How can we make 6 in 2 cells? Well, there are 2 ways, 2, 4 and 1, 5. Well, the 1, 5 variation isn't going to work now because then we'd have 3 cells that all need to contain the numbers 1 and 5. So this must be 2, 4 now. Now have a look at the middle row. Use our 45 rule again. What can we tell about the middle row using our 45 rule? Well, we already have cages completely contained within this middle row that sum to 15, 29, 35. So I know this cell and this cell have got to add up to 10. Well, the first thing that tells us is this can't be a 5. If it's a 5, this would have to be a 5 as well. That would be a problem. So if this is a 1, this will be a 9. This is a 3, this will be a 7. Well, 9 here is already impossible because we have the 9 and the 8. Let's remove that. So this is in fact 7 and 3. This 15 cage now can only be made using the 6 and 9 combination. And now this 14 cage is forced to be 1, 8, 5. Similarly, Sudoku rules again, 1 here, 1 here. I need to put a 1 either in this cell or this cell. Well, I can't put a 1 here. That would make these two have to add up to 20, which is not possible. So we can add the 1 into that cell there. These two cells have to add to 13 without using 5, without using 9. Well, we can only do that one way. That's got to be 6 and 7 now. Oops. And so on and so forth. So I hope this is useful. I'll leave the rest of it as an exercise for you. As I say, this was from the Daily Telegraph yesterday. Do send us puzzles if you're struggling with them. If we have time, we will definitely try and help you out, either by sending you a message or by doing a video. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoy the content. We really appreciate that. And we'll be back soon with another edition. Cracking the Cryptic.